U.S. economy added more jobs than expected in the month of March. We added 228,000, well above the 135,000 jobs that were anticipated. That's good news for the U.S. economy. Well, obviously, we're going to continue throughout the day to talk about tariffs and what's going on Wall Street. Wall Street is having still a very rough day. The NASDAQ is down 4%, S&P down 4%, Dow down 3.5%. What direction is all of this going to continue to go? When does it bottom out? Are we going to be in that bear market on the NASDAQ as everybody is concerned about? That's what everybody's talking about. But as far as what's happening in the U.S. economy, we're adding jobs faster. It has kind of offset what people thought was headed toward a recession as job growth is happening in spite of federal layoffs. Long term, how is this going to affect the U.S. economy? Traders are betting that the Fed will cut interest rates now possibly 4 times. Traders are now betting the Federal Reserve will cut at least 4 times this year amid fears that tariffs could tip the U.S. into a recession. Odds of 5 quarter-point cuts coming this year jumped to 37.9%. Still less than 50%, but people are thinking that may be 5 quarter-point cuts could happen. If that happens, what direction do things go? We do know that interest rates, mortgage rates have dropped, which has helped many people. And so let me get to that for a minute. Mortgage rates fell sharply Thursday following the administration's tariff announcement. The average rate of a popular 30-year fixed-rate mortgage plunged 12 basis points to 6.63%, according to the Mortgage News Daily. The massive sell-off in the stock market early Thursday sent investors fleeing to the bond market. That caused bond yields to drop. Mortgage rates loosely follow the yield on the 10-year Treasury. They've been moving in a very, very narrow range since late February. So this is not an advocacy for tariffs. This is just reacting to the U.S. economy. Will this spur the housing market in Arizona? There are many people with mortgages near 3%, and they're not going to pay mortgages at 6.5%. Just not going to do it. So they're going to stay in the homes they're in longer. They're going to remodel. They're going to fix things up. They're going to do what they have to do to keep it the home they love. And they'll wait until a friendlier time. And is that time going to be now for some people? Interesting story about eviction filings. Eviction filings fell 15% in March from February. But they're saying that was not unforeseen, that we've seen more these eviction filings by landlords happen to fall between November and March. There may be an uptick sometime later on in the year. The reason why I'm running through these things so quickly is the direction of the U.S. economy. I want you to hear, this is going way back. This is Chuck Schumer talking about shrinking the size of the government. And interesting also, and you'll hear what he has to say about a number of things, but it's interesting. He sounds a lot like Elon Musk.
Over where we go, people say, well, why can't you stop illegal immigrants or others from coming here? And the number one answer we give our constituents is when they come here, they can get jobs, get benefits against the law because of fraud. And here, the gentleman from Florida has put together the most effective anti-fraud measure we can find without it changing the actions of the government one bit. And we find all this opposition. Ladies and gentlemen of this chamber, what I worry about is that this bill, which started out with good intentions, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, is going to end up being the same kind of thing that the public gets angry with us on. We say we're doing something, and we do nothing. Because every time someone makes a rational and small proposal to get something done, people say, well, what about this hypothetical, that hypothetical, etc. I urge support of this amendment. If you believe you want to stop fraud in immigration, you have no choice but to support this amendment.
So isn't it fascinating that we're hearing people talking out of both sides of their mouths? It happens on both sides of the political aisle when it's convenient. But isn't it interesting that when it comes to fraud and waste, and there's more announcements coming, there is still this pushback, the protest daily at the Tesla facilities. I don't know how it's going to end up, and there's going to be more coming up at 9:35. We're going to go deeper with some of the comments from Danny's side and the fears of tariffs, the disaster that Wall Street has been over the last couple of days, what direction is this economy going? Are we going to dive ourselves into a recession? It's a fear for everyone. I certainly don't want to see the American people that happen to the American people. Is there going to be a resolution sooner rather than later where some of the major nations that we trade with are going to come to the table? It's a bigger part of the discussion. But where we are in the U.S. economy right now, jobs continue to grow. We've got to look at wage growth more than anything else. Inflation is still flat. We are not seeing massive inflation growth, but will we see that with price increases coming because of tariffs? They all loop together. But when you look at some of the positive things that have happened, the potential for the shrinking of the U.S. government, there is a big question about getting something done on a budget so that we quit doing continuing resolutions. We can get rid of programs that are outdated and obsolete and cut those programs. If we're going to do those things, if we're able to do those things, will we not see a shrinking government also reduce inflation, which is all a big part of it? That's what this whole thing is moving in that direction. I wish there was a way, myself included, that I could do it for myself, where your political leanings, you could step out of them and look at things just for what they are. That's why I bring on a Danny Seiden. Danny Seiden, you heard him say this morning, you'll hear him later on say, I want the president to be successful. If I'm wrong, I'll gladly say I was wrong. I look at history. I talked earlier about my conversation with Chris Cuomo. We've been texting this morning. Chris Cuomo thinks these tariffs are going to be disastrous and that they need to be pulled sooner rather than later. There's a push by some Republicans, including Rand Paul in the United States Senate. The problem is, this is where the politics of all this come into play, because the power to levy these tariffs or impose these tariffs were given to a Democratic president by a Democratic Congress, and now they say that the president can't do it. Well, this is what happens when you give up these powers. This is what happens when you say, you look at what they did with the filibuster. Senator Kyrsten Sinema did something that most people didn't think Arizona could do, which was elect a Democrat to the Senate. We now have 2 Democrat senators in what is usually a red state. But Senator Sinema is the one that broke that ceiling. She broke that glass ceiling as a Democrat. Her party got mad at her for saving the filibuster. And what happened? You just saw the longest floor speech. Now, to be fair, it was not technically a filibuster because it wasn't over a specific piece of legislation. But it was a filibuster. It was the longest floor speech in the history of the United States Senate by Cory Booker. And it was only able to happen because Senator Sinema drew a line in the sand and said, I'm not doing this. It's bad for America. It might be good right now this minute for Democrats. Well, as it turns out, look where the Democrats are. Where would they be right now without the filibuster? My point is, all of these things we end up weaving in politics. The people that don't like Donald Trump hate his guts and love the fact that right now it looks like he's not being successful and they're jumping on this. What's the reality of what's happening in the U.S. economy? And are we going to see improvements? That's all that matters to me. I voted for Donald Trump because I believe that he would be the best person to operate the U.S. economy and carry it forward. I'm not giving up on that, but it doesn't have to be a political conversation. If this turns out to be wrong, I'm going to be someone that said I was wrong as well. Done it too many times to count. I've been wrong too many times to count.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Catch up on Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast, and click the button in the middle to subscribe.